Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Just Talking About Films podcast. My name is Ian Sargentson.
And my name's Luke Taylor, and it's great to be with you again and to get into talking about films. And it's just something we love to do. We can't say we know it all, but we do know that we love talking about films. Sorry, Ian, yes, you do know it all. I apologise.
My opinion is an opinion that I respect. But today we've got a guest with us. We've got Matt. I assume it's pronounced Batten, is that right?
Yeah, that's it, Matt Batten.
Yeah, so we've got Matt Batten, who I was introduced to on Twitter. We've been chatting backwards and forwards, so it's great to have him here to just talk about films with us today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt.
Yeah, so I'm Director of Communications in the Diocese of Llandaff, and I've just love films. I live in Cardiff. Really good to be back in the cinema, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later on. But I spent most of lockdown going through my to be watched list. Brilliant. So it's been great. And now back to normal. It's like, am I going to squeeze all the other films in I need to watch?
Yeah, well, it's great to have you with us. So we look forward to you joining this conversation and chatting to you about all things film, really.
Great.
So first, we always start with what we've been watching over the last week or so. So Luke, do you want to tell us what you've been watching?
Yes, and I have to be honest, I've not had a great week. I've had a busy, it's been an okay week, not personally. I used to have a lot of spare time. So I've only seen 2 films this week. I've watched a lot of trailers, though. We went on Saturday, first time back at the cinema since Cineworld closed. And we went to see Those Who Wish Me Dead with Angelina Jolie in. And I got to say, I don't know whether it was just because it was on the big screen, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed. I mean, I knew how much I missed it, but I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed being at the cinema. And it was a good film to go back to the cinema to. It had explosions, it had fire, it had some wonderful photography, it had bad guys that they just went all out to make these guys the worst guys ever. So yeah, I can't say it mightn't be a great film when I watch it on TV at some point, but I had a wonderful time watching it.
And was how many people were at the cinema? Was it full? Was it quiet?
No, it wasn't. I'd say it was about a third full. There was people there. There was people milling. Peter Rabbit 2 looked very full. Of kids. So we were quite glad we hadn't gone to see that.
I think that's not bad, though, is it? Because I think, apart from peak times when I used to go, a third full was generally good. Yeah. As we said the other week, I tended to avoid peak times because I like less people.
Especially for a film like that, which wasn't really ever going to be a big film. So yeah, the film was enjoyable. The experience was more enjoyable. But yeah, we had a great time. And then the only other thing I've seen this week is I've done the remake of The Italian Job, because I'd never seen it. I did The Italian Job for the first time last week, so I thought I'll do how on earth it can call itself a remake, though. It's not. They stole the title and minis, and that's about it.
Stole the title and used the same car, but a modern version. That's it.
And it's like, it's an entirely different. Why? I'd have enjoyed it more if it had a different title.
Yeah, that's what I think about a lot of films like that.
And if you're gonna do, they didn't call it a remake; they called it a homage. But if you're gonna do that, you have to have a cliffhanger at the end. And I was so disappointed that it just ended with, and they all lived happily ever after. No cliffhanger. So whilst I enjoyed it, I was very disappointed in the last couple of minutes. Yeah,
and I was the same when I watched it. Have you seen it, Matt?
No, I haven't. I've seen the original many years ago, but the remake I've not got around to it.
Well, I was the same as Luke when I did watch it. I thought it was a decent film and its own merits, and I would have preferred it more if they'd called it something else, because I'm constantly comparing it to something. But I suppose if they just used the minis, everyone would have said that was a rip-off. But just use different cars, use Ford Fiestas. Whatever you want. Not quite as iconic, but yeah, well, it was a largely American cast, so they could have used, like, I don't know, a Mustang or something, I don't know. Anyway, so Matt, what have you been watching this week?
I've been back to the cinema as well. So I was originally going to see King Kong versus Godzilla, but totally forgot that we're living in COVID world, and turned up and it was fully booked, obviously. So I went to see The Unholy, which, if you look at the reviews online, you wouldn't want to go to the cinema to see it. However, I just thought I'm at the cinema. I'm going to go and see something. Really enjoyed it. It's a horror film, but it's that kind of 15 horror. You know, it's not quite horror. There's a few jump scares going on, and it's billed as a theological horror. So it's the usual. Someone sees an apparition of the Virgin Mary and thinks that, you know, the Virgin Mary is now, you know, bestowing all these miracles and everything, and then it's like a benevolent evil spirit story. I enjoyed it, but I think mainly because I was in the cinema, and it was exciting to be back in the cinema watching a film. And if it was on TV on the horror channel, you'd probably be like, yeah, that was all right. But, you know, with the popcorn and the Diet Coke, I was like, yeah, I actually really enjoyed it.
How was the experience for you? Was it full?
No, not at all. Everyone was going to see Peter Rabbit and King Kong, and nobody was going to see The Unholy. I think there was probably about 20 people in there, and it was quite a big screening. So 20 people, that was it. And a couple of people walked out before the end, which I'm always surprised about, because I just think it wasn't worth walking out of. You might not have thought it was the greatest horror film ever, but to actually get up and bother going out.
There's not many films I've walked out of. I have walked out of a few.
Really?
But not many.
What ones have you walked out of?
Well, let me think. I walked out. You ever seen, was it called Quartet?
Oh, is that Billy Connolly? Yeah, I know.
We just sat and turned to each other at one point and thought, you know what, I'd rather be doing anything else right now.
I've never walked out of any. I've only turned one off on the TV, I think, and I haven't seen the end of it. And that was Lucy.
It's a strange film.
It's just weird. But as for the cinema, I mean, I feel bad because, as you know, someone who loves films, I haven't been back to the cinema yet, and probably for the reason that you were highlighting, Matt, is that I miss the experience, but I want the experience to be something I really want to see, or something that's going to be good. I don't want to not cheapen the experience, because the experience will be good, but I just really want to enjoy the whole thing and not think I hadn't seen that.
Yeah,
so.
I was really up for. I just think something like King Kong versus Godzilla is made for the big screen, isn't it? You've just got to go and that's what I really wanted to go and see. But what I liked about The Unholy was it had a really good use of sound, which worked well in the cinema. It was a bit like Event Horizon, you know, where the sound sort of surrounds you and you're not sure where it's all coming from. That I really enjoyed. But overall, Ian, you might want to save yourself for a better cinema experience than The Unholy. But I've watched a couple of other films online as well. So I watched a film called Frank and Robot.
Oh, Frank and the Robot.
Oh, Robot and Frank. Yeah, that's the one, which I actually really enjoyed, surprisingly. So about this guy with dementia whose son buys him like a robot to take care of him. And it's a bit of a heist story, bit of a comedy, quite, you know, a nice feel-good film. It's only on for an hour and a half, and it's on Prime, so that was perfect Sunday night viewing. And last night, and Ian, you know this because I messaged you to say what I was watching. I watched for the first time Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee film.
Oh, right.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
it was so good. I have not seen a Spike Lee film before, but I heard him on Kristen Guru Murphy's podcast, Things to Change the World, and he was talking about his life and his films and everything. I thought, I really need to watch some of his films. They just passed me by. Absolutely outstanding film. Yeah, loved it.
So I was telling you when you messaged me that it was on my list because I think it got highlighted to me. It was on, you know, recommended for you.
It was really good. I'm still not sure what to make of the end, because it's all about escalation and how what seems like a really minor thing escalates into this massive big event that for it to have been done in 1989, I kind of come away thinking, oh, not a lot has changed. You know, that something can still trigger this big, a big outrage. And it was just fascinating studying how things just slowly get bigger and bigger, and it can become such a consuming event for all those sort of characters involved.
You know, saying that, how little things have changed as well. I tried to brush up today. We'll come to it in a bit, but I started Enter the Dragon. Haven't finished it. It is a rewatch. I've seen it before, but there's a scene right at the start of there where it could have been written today, where two cops pull a black guy over.
Yeah,
except
exactly.
this guy knows kung fu. But
the language is still really shocking, isn't it? To hear
but it feels like that could be made today and be exactly the same.
No, I agree.
It's crazy to think how we've come so far in so many ways, but also we've really not gone that far at all.
I'm glad I watched it at this moment in time as well, with the whole Black Lives Matter thing still being in your mind, and George Floyd being what was happening in the news very recently, and so to watch it from that perspective and that lens was quite an eye opener. And the reason I'm not sure what to think of the end is because part of me thinks that was an over the top reaction to what started as a really small thing. But I also recognize now I'm saying that from someone in a very, very privileged middle-class white position. And that little thing wouldn't have been such a big deal. So it's really opened my eyes, and I've just got to watch more Spike Lee films because, wow, what a talent. What a talent.
Yeah, and I think I'd heard that before as well about the ending. It's quite controversial because I think, without spoiling it, because I haven't seen it, the main character has a decision to make on what he's going to do.
Yep.
But it also apparently reflects on you, and I don't know if you experienced this, where what you would do in that situation. But obviously, as you say, we're all coming at it from different frames of reference, different lenses. So it's something I'm really looking forward to watching.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because you see this moment where he makes a split second decision, and the way the camera is lingering with what's going on behind him, and it's almost, you can see the cogs turning of I'm just going to do it, and it just triggers something just amazing.
So me, this week I've watched a few films. I watched Run on Netflix.
Oh, is that the mother-daughter one?
Yeah, the mother-daughter one with the girl that's in a wheelchair. And although it was predictable in a lot of ways, I thought it was really as well done as I thought it would be or could be from one of these Netflix movies.
I thought the guy who directed it is film before that, Searching. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it was the same guy.
Same guy where the whole film takes place on a computer screen, and it had some real good style in it. I thought Run. It's predictable, but there was a good twist at the end, I thought. The
twist, I don't know. I kind of saw it coming.
Well, the big not that twist. The very, very, very end twist.
Oh right, yeah. I thought, but I thought it was well done. There was a couple of bits in it that were a bit unbelievable. I don't normally complain about films being too short, but I think it could have been 15, 20 minutes longer to unpack it a bit further, because it builds up so well and then kind of finishes really quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, and there's one bit that I'm thinking a bit like, but the tension was there. I was engaged throughout, so I enjoyed it. I think I gave, on my Instagram page, I gave it a 7. So, yeah, for one of these Netflix or Prime things where I just keep churning them out, I thought it was one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Then I watched Almost Famous. So I don't know if you've seen that.
That's a bit of a throwback, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What was that, in 90s?
2000, I think.
Ah, right, okay.
But it keeps coming up in, on the films you have to watch before you die, or these top 100 lists, and I never really fancied it. It's about some kid that blags his way to work for Rolling Stone, covering an up-and-coming rock band. And I thought, I can't be bothered about another sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. Do you know what I mean? It's all been done before. I've seen it in so many films. But because it was so highly rated, I thought I'd give it a go. And I really enjoyed it because of the main character, really, because of his journey throughout it, because they could have went cliched with it, but they chose not to, which I thought was the braver choice, and I really, really enjoyed that. And then there's a lot going on in the film. There is the sex, drugs, rock and roll narrative, but it's not the main narrative. The main narrative is a love story, really. So I enjoyed that. Then I watched Fight Club, which I was saying.
I know, I'm very curious to know what you
most people who know me. So I watched Fight Club on release years ago, and the people, the friends that I went with were buzzing about it, loved it. Oh, it was so clever, this, that, and the other. And I thought it was one of the most boring things I've ever seen. Everyone's like, "Oh, bored about the twist," but yeah, but I was kind of onto it. And then it was like, beyond that, it was just like, oh, right. So then, as you know, I've been rewatching a lot of films to see if they've changed my opinion. A lot have for the better, some have for the worse, some have stayed the same. And this was the one I was kind of most looking forward to and most reluctant, because not I didn't want to be, but it's like a lot of the films I've watched it's been 10 or 15 years. I've matured as a person and a film viewer. So I know that that's changed a lot of things because I listen to the dialogue now, whereas it used to just be about the action. I want to be entertained. Now I watch it for the story and how it makes me feel. And it's one of them things that now I can see why people rate it so highly. Mm. But I just wasn't entertained. I thought it was clever. I thought it was stylish. I thought it was well done. But I was just like, I'm just not entertained by this.
Really?
Yeah.
I think if you had said this to me back in the day, I would have been like, you must have seen a different film. You are probably the only person that I know has ever had that reaction to it.
Yeah. It's my most controversial film opinion.
Yeah,
I think if I'd have rated it when I first watched it, I'd have given it a 5. And this week I gave it a 7 because I can understand why everybody finds it so appealing. Wow. But I just don't. I wasn't entertained. I didn't feel anything. I didn't really have any empathy for the characters. Do you mean? But I thought it looked good and it was kind of clever, but that was it.
Wow. Everything about the film just feels so badly behaved. Like the direction feels badly behaved. The music, there's something about it. It just feels like a film. Like, look at what we've got away with. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I admire it and appreciate it as a filmmaker. So I thought the acting was excellent, really, really good. I thought stylistically it was good. It was clever. It was edgy. It wasn't just. It was bold, really. It wasn't just pushing the same things. It spoke into real matters for people. Do you know what I mean? So even though it's a dark look, it's a look at significant issues in people's lives. But for me, I appreciate it. I just didn't enjoy it. And I don't mean, it made me feel great. I just didn't enjoy this. And I think I'm the same, and this may be my second most controversial film, but I have the same reaction to Inception, really. I think great film, massively appreciate it, but then it just kind of spoils itself.
Oh, that's it. We're done now. We're done.
I haven't seen Inception yet. It's on the list, but I kind of, when films get really hyped up, sometimes I leave it a while. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, because then you just end up getting either hugely disappointed because it doesn't match the expectation, or I don't know, it just kind of puts me off a little bit. So that's one that I've just not got around to watching.
If you're watching this or listening to this, and I'd be interested to let you know if there's anybody else out there that doesn't really enjoy Fight Club as a thing. And if you do, that's fine. And I know most people do. And I say, I'm not knocking it because I can appreciate why people like it. It's just not a film I would rush to watch again. So
there's something about this whole turning your back on the way society is and just going for it and just leave the apartment behind, leave IKEA behind forever, leave the job behind, and just this idea of just throwing yourself into something else that is really appealing. But I think it tricks you into thinking that's what the film is, but it's not. It's not about that at all.
No. And that's a good segue, actually, for the final film that I've watched this week. So the final film that I watched this week is one that I wish I'd gone to the cinema because it isn't at my local cinema to see. Mm-hmm. I finally caught up with Nomadland. Oh. So, and it is not the same situation, but it's about leaving everything behind, abandoning, life as you knew it and embarking on something new, not through choice, but through necessity in this case. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Aesthetically, it's one of the best films I've ever seen.
It looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
Yeah. Francis McDormand.
So you didn't go to the cinema, you said?
No, I watched it on Disney.
Yeah, because I've noticed it's on Disney, so I was planning on watching it, but I know a few people have said something similar to you, which was you've got to go see it on the big screen.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether I should.
I think I probably will as well. But it wasn't underwhelming on the small screen. I have a big TV anyway, and it was HD and all that, but 4K or whatever. But it was still beautiful. But on the big screen, I imagine it was in a properly dark room. It'd be just something else. But Frances McDormand was outstanding again. She's just incredible. But it was one of them films that it's you know what it's about. And if you don't and you're listening and watching, it's just about circumstances force a lady to have to essentially live in a van and try and find work and go from job to job and live as like a modern nomad. And in some ways, it showed the harsh reality of that lifestyle. But it wasn't like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. It showed the community, the opportunities, the joy that lifestyle afforded her, the relationships that were built, people helping one another out. So I'm not saying it was appealing, but it really, for me, spoke into that. Where are our priorities in life? So we've got all this stuff, but it's these things that people need to be happy. These are the things that are constant. So I thought it was good. I thought the direction was outstanding. I think it deserves all of the plaudits that it got. I mean, a lot of people have said, I wouldn't rush to watch it again. I would love to watch it again. It's one of them things that not a lot happens, but it's just, you go along with the main character.
It'd be interesting to see it on the big screen. So we did it at home. The trouble is at home, because it's not very plot driven, it's not very, there's not a lot of momentum in it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get distracted while watching it. So I enjoyed it, but I feel like I was a little distracted whilst watching it. Whereas on the big screen, it's a different experience, isn't it?
Yeah. And you say it's quite constant. There's not much change in tempo. And I was waiting for that change in tempo. Like they're in the middle of the desert. I was waiting for, I don't know, a biker gang or somebody to come across them and all to kick off. But it didn't. And I'm glad it didn't in a way, because it's trying to reflect real life for these people. And the fact that a lot of the actors played themselves, I thought was a clever move.
It was, and you can't tell which is which.
No,
you can't. It's yeah.
Apart from, there was only one other actor I recognised from anything else, so I knew he wasn't playing himself.
Yes. Yeah.
But I loved it. So that's what I've been watching this week. So if you're listening, or where you of course are listening, or you wouldn't be able to hear me, but wherever you're listening, get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter and let us know what it is that you've been watching. Yeah,
or what you think of the films we've mentioned. Maybe you disagree with our Ian's opinion of Fight Club.
Yeah, my turn this week. After Luke told the whole world how much he hates The Greatest Showman, now it's me.
That made me laugh. I was like, wow.
I believe I'm going to have to defend that opinion in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I've got guests on in a couple of weeks that's taken issue with that. So very good.
Looking forward to that.
So as I say, we've got Matt with us this week, and so we're going to ask Matt some questions about the films of his life. Is that all right with you, Matt?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
So first, Matt, can you tell us a film that is, and I know it's difficult, I would say your favourite film, but people always get whiny and go, but I can't just choose one. So if you can choose a film that is one of your favourites, then...
Do you know, the one that probably sticks in my mind, because I just remember being off sick and watching a black and white film that was on Channel 4 or S4C during the day, and it's called Foreign Correspondent. I don't know if you are Alfred Hitchcock fans. It's not one that anyone rates as being anywhere near, like the Vertigo or the Psycho of his back catalogue. I absolutely love it. And I think it was being quite young and seeing a black and white film that was not stagey and not so boring. It was actually really exciting. And I think that was my starting point in seeking out a director, because Foreign Correspondent is brilliant, and it's a real rip-roaring kind of boys' own adventure, with the typical someone's been mistaken and it's mistaken identity, and they've got to try and save secrets, etc. But it's during the war, so it's a very Hollywood version of it, and it's it was used to try and encourage people to feel in America to enter the war. So you've got to see it from that point of view. But there's so many exciting chase scenes in it, and some very iconic Alfred Hitchcock moments It's brilliant. It's one of those ones that you're not going to see in the best of Alfred Hitchcock, but it's a truly excellent film. I loved it.
Well, I've just written that down.
Still do.
Yeah,
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've just written it down to add to the list. Yeah, I mean, I like Hitchcock as far as I've watched the ones that are on those lists.
Yeah.
You know, so I think Luke started talking about them last week, so I've watched the more famous ones, but I'll definitely look out for that. Yeah.
This might be a similar answer, but if you could think of another film as well, which film caused you to fall in love with films?
I know that one straight away. It's Singing in the Rain.
Oh.
Now, I don't think I'd ever seen anything that looked and sounded so gorgeous on screen. And Gene Kelly, and actually the three leads, there is something magical when you watch Singing in the Rain. And, you know, Gene Kelly's dancing, the music is just brilliant, and the dialogue is really sharp. Like, I don't find, like, some musicals can be really corny and really cheesy, but this one, I just don't find it at all. I just find it a real joy to watch, to immerse yourself in that technicolor world of classic Hollywood with these stars who, you know, belong to you did the time you didn't know much about them. Whereas, you know, you watch Hollywood films now and, you know, everyone's private lives are splashed all over the thing. But these are just people, you know, their sole job is to act and entertain you. And that film is fab. And I was, once I watched it, I tend to get a little bit obsessed with things once I've got into them and got to know everything about it, you know. And I remember reading reviews about Singing in the Rain, and one review said, you know, it could have done without the big extended dance sequence, you know, Broadway melody. And for me, that was just me sat there. There's no dialogue for like 15, 20 minutes or something. I would have been about 14, so I was still into the whole, you know, Arnie Schwarzenegger kind of, you know, action films. But a 20-minute film where I was just mesmerised by the dancing. Oh, it's such a funny film. Still a highlight. I love watching it. Brilliant. It's a gorgeous film.
Don't think I've seen it for a long time. I think it's one of those films that I remember not seeing. And again, it might be good to rewatch it now because it's one of them things that I watched, but not through my own choice. It's one that my parents would have put on the TV and made us all watch together. And I was, I don't know, reading Beano or something. But but something that I remember aspects of it, but I couldn't tell you any more apart from that famous scene.
Yeah, it's a truly, truly magical film.
With the lamppost and stuff. So I'll get to that as well. Can you remember, Matt, the first film that you saw at the cinema?
Yeah, I can. It was E.T.
E.T.
E.T. was the first film in the embassy in Bridgend that I saw, and my auntie took me, and I always remember she said she would never take me to the cinema again because I was inconsolable. Yeah. Apparently I cried I cried when he got lost at the beginning. I was terrified that something was going to happen to him all the way through. Then, you know, there's no spoilers to say something happens and, you know, they think he's died. And apparently that was at that point, she was like, I think we're going to have to leave the cinema because I was just howling. It's I think I look back on ET as being a really emotive time, you know, of a film that can evoke such emotions in someone in the cinema. Yeah, and then I think I bought it on Blu-ray, so, you know, not that long ago. Rewatched it, and I was like, this is just outstanding. Yeah. No wonder kids just fell in love with Steven Spielberg and E.T.
Yeah,
because that man knows how to make a film for kids.
Well, this is a theme here because a couple of weeks ago we had Simon on and he said...
Yes, that's right.
He said the same. And that caused me to rewatch it in between these times. And it's one of them films that, and again, I knew I loved it as a kid, but I wanted to watch it now. And it took me back to being a kid. That's what I love. That the magic that I felt now, I felt is the same as I felt then. It turned me into a kid, just the excitement and the joy and even the emotive bits, as you say. It's like, well, I know what's real and what's, but it's like, wow, it's like, yeah. So I loved it. And Luke's
it's a superb film. And when I watch it, I just can't believe how good the young kids are in it.
Oh,
Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't think she's acting. You know, and also the thing about how he directs the family, I find really interesting. Like it's not sort of one person has their bit to say, then another person reacts. It's all sort of like interwoven. The dialogue's overlapping each other.
It's all very natural, isn't it?
Yeah, and it felt really real watching it. Like you just felt this was a family that you could relate to.
Yeah.
You know, and the mother, you know, being a single mother, and you know, I don't think I picked that up as a kid.
No,
I watched it and I was like, this is really grown up.
Yeah, and while they're trying to explain away that you know, the broken family, the dad's gone away, the mother's still upset, and they're trying to link that to Elliot's behaviour in some way. Do you know what I mean? The kind of humour in him when he says he's seen things because he's acting out. But
that's all from Steven Spielberg's own life as well. You know, growing up without a dad in the house and trying to navigate that himself. That whole film's about how he felt about that.
Wow.
And it's so he gets it. You know, he's lived in that house. He's had those conversations at home. It's I tell you what.
Controversy. Oh, sorry. Go on. You carry on, Luke.
Nobody directs kids like him.
No, not at all. He's really got a handle on it. But it also reminds me of Poltergeist. So this might be a controversial thing. I know we're supposed to think Steven Spielberg didn't direct it. But when I watch Poltergeist and I see how the family interact with each other, it always reminds me of how the family are in E.T.
Well, apparently he was so hands-on. He might as well have directed it.
Yeah,
there's a bit of a controversy there as to, did he really direct it after all? I mean, you know, was he so hands-on that it's really his film?
Yeah. I think I know where I come down on that one.
Yeah,
I think
it feels like his film.
It feels like his film, doesn't it?
But going back just to E.T., it's another one of the films, and we might talk about this in a few weeks or something, about where it just has some iconic scenes. And when I was thinking about iconic scenes the other day, most of them, and we'll probably talk about this in another topic, I think, most of my favourite iconic scenes are to scores by John Williams. Do you know what I mean? So with the whole bike scene and stuff in E.T., it is just, even now, if it just comes on, it's like the music and that scene in front of the moon, it just causes my heart to soar, really.
Oh, his score at the very end of that film when the spaceship takes off and that crescendo that he hits on that, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think music is so powerful in films, and that's one thing I think I've realised in the last 10 years. I think I knew it before because of Jaws. Still scares the life out of me, but in a positive way as well. There's just so many things that, and even it's not just him, but he was probably the master at it, but so many other good ones. So yeah.
And there's a lot more appreciation of film scores, I think, now. I think there always used to be a bit of a snobbery about, you know, they were just popularist classical music just to get, you know, the punters' emotions up during the films. But, you know, you've got programs like Mark Commode on Scala Radio on a Saturday afternoon who does a real deep dive into some really bizarre films, and the scores are just outstanding that he picks. And Classic FM at the movies on a Saturday night, you know, they'll pick some, you know, a John Williams theme or, you know, James Horner theme week, or a Spy Week theme. And it's like, wow, you know, there's a lot more out there for people to appreciate film scores these days, I think.
Yeah, and I think the first glimpse I got to it was when I was doing media studies at A level, and we had to watch cartoons, funnily enough, without the music. And it was one of the most bizarre and boring things I've ever done. You know, Tom and Jerry it was. Tom and Jerry without the music. It was like not engaged at all. But so it starts at an early age, the music accompanying these things.
Yeah. Even for film, the silent film, there was no silent. Before they could talk, it always had music. It might have had to have been live, but it had to be the right music for that film. You wouldn't just, you'd send the film out with the music you wanted it to be, you know, right from the off. Music's been so important.
Have you been to any of the sort of like silent film showings where they'll have a guest musician to play the score as the film plays? No. Oh, there's Southwest Silence down in Bristol and the Southwest. They organise a series of films. So I'll drive over to Bristol and watch, you know, Battleship Potemkin with, you know, someone on the organ playing it, or a real small old cinema and they're playing Dracula or Vampire and someone's, you know, playing the score for that. It's just another world. It's a whole other language of screen.
Hey, bringing it back to ET again, I don't know if your Blu-ray's got it on, but the DVD had it. The 20th anniversary one, where there's a version of it you can watch with the score being played live at the Hollywood Bowl with an audience.
Oh, I haven't watched that one. No.
And so you can watch the whole film, and they've just overlaid the sound, so it's the score being played live, but you can hear the audience as well, and it's a great way to watch it.
Yeah, I went to Royal Albert Hall a couple of years ago and saw Skyfall done that way, and Casino Royale as well. And it is, I didn't think I'd like it, because essentially you're just paying loads of money to see a film you've seen quite a few times with a live orchestra. It does add something else to it.
Yeah,
it really does.
So just quickly moving on, what film, Matt, do you love that you don't think gets enough recognition elsewhere?
That is a really good one. It's a Bruce Lee film, I'll have to say, right? It's Game of Death. Okay. No one will put that as a favorite of the kung fu genre, and no one will say it's a Bruce Lee film. It's technically a Bruceploitation film made to cash in on his name. I love it. I think the score by John Barry is superb. I know Bruce is only in it for the last 20 minutes and everyone else is played by someone who looks like Bruce Lee, but it's a brilliant film. I find it really exciting. Watched it when I was quite young, and I will, it's a hill I'll die on to say. It's a really, really good kung fu film. Just give it a go. I think it's superb, and it's John Barry's score is brilliant and is hugely underappreciated. And I did write into Mark Kermode's film show on Scala and ask him to play a piece from it, which he did.
Wow.
Which I was really quite excited about. But yeah, it's on no one's top 10 list at all. But I just think it's a really exciting kung fu film.
Fantastic. I mean, I think I have watched it, but it must be a long time ago.
Yeah.
So off the back of this, undoubtedly, off the back of today's episode, I will watch more Bruce Lee films because of what we're going to talk about in the final part of the show.
Excellent.
Which film? This is one where you can get a bit more controversial.
Okay.
Do you just not get the hype, or everybody thinks it's great, but you just think it's Greatest Showman level bad?
Oh, Titanic! What on an absolute load of nonsense that is. 3 hours of my life I will never get back. Wow. I don't understand it. I don't understand how anyone thinks that is a great film. I can't understand why people went to the cinema in their droves to see it. I mean, it's hammy, it's overlong, it's melodramatic. Maybe that's all the things people love, but
I think they're all the positives.
I just don't like it. And I watched it, maybe about 2-3 years ago again, thinking, do you know what? Maybe I just need to watch it again, give it another go. Oh, it's just appalling. I just don't get it. The good thing about it is Celine Dion, and that says a lot.
Oh, no.
So, do you agree with Matt on his views on Titanic? Get in touch, let us know. I think my issue with Titanic, I didn't mind it. I think a lot of the hype was around DiCaprio, and that was before I didn't like him because everybody was going mad about him. I didn't realise what a talented actor he was because I kind of got overlooked in the beginning. But the thing that annoys me about the whole thing is the ending. Why did the ship have to crash? No, it's not. But it's more.
Spoiler.
It's more about when the end bit where that big plank of wood. I'm pretty sure you could fit 10 people on there. And he tries once and then goes, yeah, no, I can't. That's it. And then she says, I'll never let go. But 2 seconds before she lets go. Yeah, you're a liar.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, he's trying to get on that boat and he's just realises when he's trying to get on that plank what a life with her would actually be like, and thinks, you know what?
Yeah. I think we can all understand where he was coming from. It's like, oh, Rose, no, you're all right. Off you go.
But it's like, Jack, I'll never let go. Let go.
I'm off. Yeah, honestly, I just don't understand it.
I agree. It's certainly, when you rewatch it now, especially, you look back and you go, it's not great. But when the boat starts sinking, the ship starts sinking, it's some pretty good cinema at that bit. There's some good stuff going on there.
No, it's not Poseidon adventure level though, is it? That's, when it goes upside down, that's a whole 70s disaster movie thrill. Spectacular.
I think I haven't seen it for such a long time, so I might need to go back to it. But
No, don't.
the
Don't.
runtime does put me off. But I think the
Yeah.
thing is, as you hinted at earlier, Matt, is that when films get overhyped, I almost resent them before I've seen them. I don't want to like them. So I've said I've shared in the past that I did it with La La Land. I thought it was over, but when I watched it, I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved that film. But with Titanic, I almost didn't want to watch it when it came to it because I was sick of hearing about it, sick of hearing the song, sick of it. But then when I did watch it, I thought it looked okay, but it was nothing new. It wasn't a new spin on things. But I wanted to be entertained. Then I wanted a quick fix. It wasn't enough explosions and fight scenes in it for me. So going back now, I might appreciate it more. I might not. I don't know.
It's amazing when you watch it now how bad the dialogue is, though.
Oh, and Billy Zane is terrible. And I mean, he's not a bad actor, but it's almost like they told him just to be this over-the-top bad guy. Everything says you're the bad guy. This guy is the bad guy right here, and he just amplifies it in every scene he's in. And the more bad he gets, the more sort of like eyeliner comes on his eyes as well, which is incredibly distracting.
Okay. And this is where we ask you, what is your most controversial film opinion? Is that it, or do you have another one?
No, Titanic is it. Titanic is the one. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what our listeners think about that, because at the time there was a lot of love for it, but I don't hear much about it now.
And a lot of good things came out of the 90s, just Titanic was not one of them.
So for the recent weeks we've had hate for The Greatest Showman, hate for Titanic, a non-caring for indifferent view of Fight Club. So we'll see. And
that's the most offensive view. You've either got to hate it or love it. Indifferent is I can't.
Well, what can I say? We're like the talk radio of film podcasts. Just a bit of clickbait there. No, these are genuinely my opinions, our opinions. So let us know what you think. So as we've hinted at, Matt, you have an appreciation of Bruce Lee. You named Game of Death, and when we talked, you said you termed it almost like an obsession.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. How you got into Bruce Lee? What it is that you like about him? Etc.
So I was way too young to have watched a Bruce Lee film when I did. I was probably about 7. And this would have been early 80s. My father was really into Kung Fu. As a martial artist, that's what he was. So we ended up watching a lot of like the Shaw Brothers films, and it was that boom of go to the Beta Barn rental shop as pre-VHS, okay, and rent just these films, and I just remember being in school and somebody you have to write what your favorite film is, and my mum saying to me, just please don't say your favorite film is Fist of Fury. Can you just say it's the Muppets or something? Because I would Bruce Lee is if in the context of all the other kung fu films that were out at that time, they were very sort of stagey, very Shaw Brothers, which is like the same set recycled, the same plot. Sometimes it's one-armed boxer, one-armed swordsman, that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. And then Bruce Lee comes on with this energy that you've not seen on screen, and I still haven't seen anyone in the martial arts film who captures it. Jackie Chan's is a very comedic. Donnie Yen is a great martial artist, but in terms of screen presence and athletic ability and a real unique voice in cinema, Bruce Lee is all of that, and he did all of that in just like 4 or 5 films. That is incredibly talented. And I mentioned Singing in the Rain earlier, and I watch Gene Kelly dancing the same way that I watch Bruce Lee do martial arts. It's a talent. This is someone who was, given his entire life to being as good as he can be at martial arts. His whole body was always finding ways that he could be better. There's a real strong philosophy behind him as well. You can watch them for the fights. You can watch it for the action and the really bad dubbing if you're not into subtitles. Or, the more you dig in about his life and you read some of his philosophy, the more you see that come through in the films that he makes. Big Boss, the first one, is just a pretty much beat 'em up. kind of film. And as they progress, they start dealing with racism, and they start dealing with some real, trying to be the best you can be, and helping the underdog kind of feel to. And that's very much, I think, what was influenced in his life as well, particularly around racism.
Was it Fist of Fury? That's the one that's about the Japanese influence in Hong Kong. And
Yeah, and there's a still what I think is a real shocking incident of racism where Bruce Lee has just beaten up some people in one of the schools, goes for a walk and wants to walk through a park, and there's a sign above it that says "No dogs and Chinese." And the guy on the gate lets this woman through with a dog. And Bruce Lee, the character, is saying, "You've let them in, why can't I go in?" He said, no dogs allowed. And then someone comes along and says, "If you want to go in, get on your knees, on your hands and knees, and pretend to be a dog, and I'll take you in." And you see this look of absolute horror and anger on Bruce Lee's face. And then he attacks him. And I just think, wow, that is still a real powerful scene for a film of someone just that level of racism, and you're almost helpless, but he fights back. Violence isn't the answer, but still, in the context of this film, that is his reaction. It's like, wow, some powerful stuff going on in those films.
Yeah, and I think the three of us would advocate, say, violence is not the answer, but there is something special when there's that escapism and you're watching a film and there's that level of injustice, and you just think, smash him in the face.
And if anyone's going to get away with it, it'll be Bruce Lee, because if I did that, someone within a couple, I'd either be arrested or they would have beaten me up. But you're never going to, I'm never going to find myself in that position of using violence. So you kind of project that onto the film you're watching, don't you? That person's done what I would never be able to do.
Yeah, because it's that kind of escapism that you feel the injustice, and in our lives we would choose a different path. Hopefully most of the time, but it's a case of then there's just something about it that, again, it's that escapism. It allows you to want something that you wouldn't want in reality.
Yes, that's right.
But I think my experience of Bruce Lee, just building on what you've said, is I remember as a kid, so I guess one kid in our school had watched a Bruce Lee film, had watched Enter the Dragon with his parents or whatever, because the quote kept going on. He kept saying this quote, right? And it's the Mr. Handman quote. But he kept saying that, and then it went around the school, and then it was boards don't hit back, and then don't think, feel, and just more quotes came out, and it just became a thing in our school. And I remember watching these Bruce Lee films, and it's one of them things, again, I was, maybe 11, 12, possibly 13, watching these things, and I loved Enter the Dragon because I could follow it fairly easily. And it was the other things, the things you're talking about, the racism stuff, I just didn't get, and not that I didn't like them, I just didn't fully get them. And there was more readily available, more instant entertainment films that captured my imagination better. But it is something I need to go back to. I think the film that I enjoyed most with Bruce Lee in, he wasn't really in. But I've not watched this since either. Any guesses what that is?
Oh, is it going to be that Quentin Tarantino film that was out recently? Oh, as in originally?
No, so it was No Retreat, No Surrender.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee was the guy in it. Yeah.
He was in it playing Bruce Lee's spirit.
Yes.
Guiding this young boy how to get revenge on this guy that had run his karate teacher out of town.
Yeah, that's right.
I think Jean-Claude Van Damme's in one of them, but I remember
he's the baddie at the beginning.
I remember this kid, and Bruce Lee's spirit was guiding him, and I was thinking, I'd love that to happen to me. You know what I mean? So the guy who plays Bruce Lee in No Retreat, No Surrender was quite famous in the Bruceploitation genre of films, where when Bruce Lee died, Hong Kong cinema were like, we need to cash in on this, and they just got random people who kind of looked a bit like him to play a version of Bruce Lee, and it would be Bruce Lee, Dragon Lee, Bruce Lowe. You get the thing, and it was all things like, the dragon fights back from the grave, Enter the Fist of Fury, Enter the Game of Death.
Very disrespectful.
Hugely disrespectful, and if you actually watch the films, they are shockingly dreadful, and I love them. There's a podcast all about Bruceploitation films. I watched one the other week called The Llama Avenger, I think it's called, about these three guys, and Bruce Lee is in it, and they are just really beyond cheap. And I remember watching one which was Enter the Game of Death, and he enters this one chamber, and it's the Snake Man, and because they couldn't have live snakes, they must obviously have drugged the snakes and tied them to this fighter's hand. And he's fighting them with these snake heads. And it is that level of badness. It's so disrespectful. Yeah, really bad.
But that was my only experience of Bruce Lee. But as I say, off the back of this, because every time we have guests on, I get influenced by what they said, and it makes me want to watch them. So I will go back. Luke, what about you?
For me, my early experience with Bruce Lee, I'm probably in a similar position to you, Matt. My dad was into martial arts, so
okay.
He had a lot of Bruce Lee films when I was younger. So but I think actually that my first memory of Bruce Lee was probably a computer game. Discovering this wasn't a computer game character but a real person was quite a thing that blew my mind. But so I'd seen them all quite young, but then hadn't seen them in years. But he was always the standard by which you compared everybody else to.
Yeah,
always.
Exactly.
But I remember going back to them and rewatching them. What I feel mostly when I watch them is sad, because you can't help but wonder what could have been.
Exactly.
How the martial arts film as a genre would be different if he hadn't have died. Because he would have, because you look at the films and they're all limited by the time they were made. Even Enter the Dragon, even though it was an American production, it was not. I mean, it's not a great film in terms of its filmmaking. What's great about it's him.
Yeah, exactly.
And to have seen the chance for him to work with some great directors, or to have developed his philosophy and choreography for other people then to pick up on, it could have changed everything. And so I feel kind of, when I'm watching Enter the Dragon, I'm enjoying it, but I just feel sad thinking, what could he have done? Because he is, I mean, in that film, everybody in it's pretty bad, except he just, every time he's on screen, it comes alive.
Yeah, he's superb, isn't it? It's funny because I know what you're saying about feeling quite sad when you watch it. That you've just got such a few films to really enjoy, and you always think, oh, what more could he have done? And quite a few years ago, they discovered more footage from what he'd filmed of Game of Death, because he abandoned it to do Enter the Dragon, and they found 40 minutes worth of footage, and it is just mind-blowingly superb because he fights different opponents with different skills, with different weapons. And that's a lot of what comes through in his films. Is it's not just the fists, it's the using weaponry differently, using his body in a particular way. And I watched that and I actually felt really emotional, thinking, wow, that is another level of ability that could have been on the cutting room floor. Thankfully, someone found it in Golden Harvest Vault.
I have to try and see.
Yeah, it's on the Blu-ray, and I think it's on the Hong Kong Legends DVD as well. Like 40 minutes extra. It's just mind blowing.
I mean, the skill of the guy, but he was still learning in a way how to do it on film. I mean, there's that story where the film editors had to slow one of his kicks down because it didn't look real. It was so fast.
Yeah. That's
it
right.
looked like it had been sped up, so they slowed it down. But the more he'd have got used to working with good filmmakers on that, I think the more he would have adapted his style. And I think we'd be looking at a very different martial arts world in terms of film today.
Because I think when he died, the sort of martial arts films then took a step back, because then they became the Bruceploitation dross that was just put out, and then it was the 80s comedy, with Jackie Chan, and
which
that
is great.
everything.
But imagine if Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee had proper collaborated.
There is a Bruceploitation and Jackie Chan exploitation film where they combine. It is not worth your time. It's really bad.
But I think, as well as the film and the influence he had on films, that there's that he was a pioneer. He was a pioneer for, bringing other cultures to the screen, to particularly with Enter the Dragon to the Western screen, and it was one of them things that he would have challenged racism, not just in the films he did, but that probably someone who was recognised as one of the toughest people on the planet, if not the toughest, you know, wasn't someone from the West. Do you know what I mean? So he was a pioneer in that, and it was something that people could get behind. So it would have been really interesting to see what he would have done, but unfortunately that wasn't to be. But I think I watched Dragon as well. But
I
don't know how
Scott
accurate
Lee.
that. I don't know how accurate that is.
Probably a bit more accurate than some of the other films about his life that have come out. I went to the cinema to see Dragon when I was probably about 15, I think it was. It would have been a 15, I think, in the cinema. Jason Scott Lee, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think he does it brilliantly. I think he's a great underrated film. But I don't know much about that sort of spiritual demon stuff is really. I think that was just to.
They do that to try and go. You know, there was a reason why he died.
Yes,
he was haunted by this. You know,
yes,
yeah.
His inner demons, playing out on the screen. We get it. I think it's a great film. I really enjoy it.
I think it's really good. I remember when it first came out, because I didn't know much about. You know, I knew he was a legend. He died early. You know, but beyond that, I didn't know anything about his life. The only trouble is once I'd seen it, I assumed that was absolutely through and through the correct story.
I think the timeline is pretty similar. You know, the kind of racism that he experienced and the backlash he had.
Did he get his back broken in a fight when he turned his back on somebody like that? Yeah,
he did, and it took him a long while to recover as well. And also the stuff around the Green Hornet. You know, where in Hong Kong it was shown, or in China it was shown as the Kato show rather than the Green Hornet, because like he was this, you know, Chinese star.
I want to rewatch Dragon now.
Oh, me too. I know. I don't think it's streaming, so I always tend to have a little look to see if it's
actually
out.
It might be on Sky at the moment.
Ah, right. Okay.
It might be.
I'll take that one out.
So I've got a question for you then. As a huge Bruce Lee fan, as someone who describes himself as obsessed, what is your opinion of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
That's a good one. I loved that film. Absolutely loved it. Bruce Lee getting his ass kicked. Oh, can I say ass?
You just did.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I thought it was quite funny, and also because he did have a level of arrogance. He was, you know, but we always forget that because he's like this role model, and no one likes to see role models with flaws. But he was arrogant, and I think he would have been quite young and cocky, and perhaps did get, you know, got a slap and knocked down. That's all right. It doesn't make him any less the icon that, you know, that we love.
See, I have a theory about
I had no problem with it.
That whole scene is Brad Pitt remembering it differently to how it went.
Exactly what I think as well. Yeah, because isn't it when he's up on the roof?
It's like a flashback when he's up repairing the roof. I think he's remembering it very differently to how it went.
Yeah, I think it's an ego arrogance kind of thing where he's remembering he's the one that, you know, the beat Bruce Lee up or something. I could not believe all the outrage that happened for it. But then Quentin Tarantino is a massive Bruce Lee fan.
Yeah,
yes.
You know, so I don't think he's doing it disrespectfully. And
no,
you know, Uma Thurman in a yellow tracksuit is just literally the biggest, you know, hat tip to Bruce Lee in Game of Death.
But that's what he says when you listen to interviews with him. That's what he grew up on, watching those films, watching the Kung Fu films. And I agree with, again, what Luke's been said. I don't think I got onto it the first time I seen it, but certainly the second time I was thinking, that thing that we all do where we remember things or retell things in a way that didn't happen. So there was this guy and I threw him into the car and it turns out it was Bruce Lee.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? It's quite a cheeky thing that he did, I thought. Great film though. I really like that film.
Very good. Well, I've really enjoyed having you with us, Matt. I've really enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you both. It's been great.
Would you be willing to come back sometime, Matt?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, definitely. Star Trek, James Bond. I mean, there's Hitchcock. You know,
you've got other obsessions. That's good to know.
Yeah. Billy Wilder. Brian De Palma's another one. A little obsessed with his films.
And just like Matt, we got introduced on Twitter. We've got a couple more guests coming up that contacted us on Twitter, said they want to be on. So if you're listening to this and you think you want to come on and talk about an aspect of film that you like, and, you know, whether it's Bruce Lee or Transformers or The Greatest Showman, whatever it is,
Not
come on,
Transformers.
and we'd love to have you on. So come and chat to us and let us know what you think, any ideas you've got for themes, things you want to discuss, any recommendations of films, and just get in touch, because that's what we're here for. I say it's not about a level of expertise, it's just people that want to chat about films, really.
Yeah, wonderful. And of course, if you are watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. We'd really appreciate that, and then you get updated every time they come on. We put them online every Saturday morning, and of course, if you're listening on any other device, on podcast or whatever, you can also hit subscribe to that as well. That just helps us out and know how many people are listening. And but we really want to connect with you. We want to talk with you.
Yeah, and we are on Facebook now as well as Twitter, so we've had some good interaction on Facebook this week with some of the questions that we've asked. So yeah, just stay in touch. We love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to follow you on Facebook. I didn't realise you were on there yet.
Oh, yes, we're on there. Yeah. We just did that this week.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm on it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Matt, and thank you everybody else for joining us as well.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.